Hello friends, in this lecture we'll be having a look at what is SUID, SGID and sticky bit. Now SUID stands for Set Owner User ID or SUID, Set Owner User ID. And what does it mean? Well, you see, many times what happens is that let's have a look at this command. Let's say I type a command password. Now you know that if I type in the command password, I can change my own password, and passwords get saved in etc shadow file, isn't it? Now if you look at the permissions of shadow file, only root has got the permission to modify the shadow file. So how does it happen? I mean, if I'm not running this command with sudo or with root privileges, but I just type in password in my own login shell, then I can change my own password. So how does this command can modify this file when this file can only be modified by root user? So isn't it? Are you following me? That's something that you need to consider, that how is this happening. Another example could be the ping command. If we do ping, this ping command opens certain sockets and ports to generate the ICMP packet to send out on the network to the remote host and get or receive the reply back. So how does that happen? Because a normal user, you see, any normal user can use the ping command to test the connectivity of the network and the availability or the liveness of the remote terminal. So how does that happen? Because ping is not being run by root privileges, or we do not append any sudo to run the ping command. How does that happen? Well, this is where the concept of SUID comes in, and the concept is that we need to run certain commands or certain programs that run with the privileges of a particular user. Now these passwords and then this ping, these commands are owned by user root. So if I'm a normal user or somebody else is a normal user and he wants to use commands like password, ping, or even cron as well, cron or add commands. So if I want to use any of these commands that need root access, one way to do that would be to use sudo. But you see, the problem with sudo is that you need to give the credentials of yourself, and that too if you are in the sudoers group. But if you are not, you cannot even use the sudo command. You either have to use the root command, but for the root login shell, but for root login shell you will need to have the root password. So in those kind of situations where you do not want to share the credentials of root, and not only root, we can take this example one step forward. So let's say there is a user Ahmed and he has got certain executable, let's say executable A file and then B file and then C file. All of these three files are executables, and there is another user, maybe Dick, and he wants to execute, let's say, either of these files. Then what he can do is that if he is not the owner of this file, then he wouldn't be able to execute it. But if we set the file permissions using those file permissions that we have seen, like 777 or read, write, execute, then if we put the Dick either in the group of Ahmed, or if it is not in the group of Ahmed but the permissions of the file say that others or whole world can execute it, he would be able to execute this file. But the problem is, would he be executing the file with the credentials of Ahmed, or would he be executing the file with the credentials of himself? Well, in this case, this normal permissions case, he will be executing the file with his own credentials. So just like I mentioned over here, these are the typical and very good examples where this SUID concept gets very much clear, that he would be able to execute it. Like we can execute the password file and ping file, but because they are executable for the whole world. But since they need to access this ping command, need to access the sockets and the ports, and this password file needs to access the shadow file, even though if we execute them, if that SUID, or if we do not execute them with the credentials of the root, we wouldn't be able to either write the shadow file or open the sockets for the ping file. So the idea that we get from this discussion is that SUID, set owner user ID, what this does is that it makes a process or a user or the file permissions in a way so that once that file gets executed by a certain user, it gets executed with the privileges of that particular user. Not only root, it could be any user, but primarily this is used for root. Now another field is SGID. Let me just clear this one so that it would be more easy to see. So in SGID, which is set group owner ID, if we have got a file, let's say file 1, and we set this set group ID bits on, then what happens is that this file gets executed with the permissions of that particular group. Also, if we have got a folder maybe, so let's say folder 1, then all the files in that folder that are created, if the SGID bit is set, then all the files created in this group will have the group membership on of that particular owner of the group. An example of this would be that, let's say I'm user Ahmed, right? And I have my home folder, let's say home Ahmed. And in that home Ahmed, I create a folder, say SGID. Just an example, you can name it anything. And in SGID folder, I set the permissions that in this folder, anybody, the group permissions are that anybody, not necessarily from my own group, but from other groups as well, anybody can read and write on this folder. So the permissions for this folder would be like 777. So in this case, what would happen is that if another user, say Tom, if Tom tries to create a file in this SGID folder, he would create it, and the file flags for ownership will be that Tom would be the owner of the file and the group of the file will be Tom as well. But on the other hand, if I set the SGID bit, set group owner ID bit of this SGID folder, then once the Tom tries to create the file in this SGID folder, the owner of the file will be Tom, but the group of the file will be Ahmed. So that's the change, because this SGID says that the contents created in the folder, they will have the group ownership of the owner of the folder. So owner of the folder is Ahmed, and he has set the SGID bit for that particular folder, which is over here. So any files created in that will have the group ownership of the owner. These things, they might seem a little bit confusing to you at the moment, but once we do this on the terminal, you will see that these things will make much more sense. An example scenario of SGID, this where we can use this SGID scenario is, for example, we have an organization, and in that organization we have multiple departments, maybe marketing, production, and HR, and we have got multiple folders for them, and we want that resources or the personnel from each of the department, once they create files in their folders, those files should get the permissions of the owner of the folder, so that anybody who gets logged into that machine or he tries to access that particular folder's contents, he should be able to get all the files, because these files are to be shared at particular department. So it's not that user A should only be able to access user A files only, because user A will have a common group. So he will be able to access all the files in that particular folder, may be created by B, C, D, or E. The last thing that I want to tell you about is the sticky bit, and the concept is that let's say we have got folder 1 over here, and what will happen is that let's say this folder has got read, write, execute permissions in this shape, which is 777. So what would happen is that any user can create a file in it and any user can delete a file in it. But if we set the sticky bit of this on this folder, then the deletion of the files can only be done by the owner of the folder, which in this case could be Ahmed or any other username who has created that folder. So that provides kind of security so that nobody should unmistakenly or intentionally should delete the contents of that particular folder. Now command-wise is pretty simple. We use the command change mode, and if we want to set the SUID bit on a file, we can use U or user ID, then plus, and then S for setting the bit, and then the file name. For setting the group ID bit, we will use change mode, then G, then plus S. While for setting the sticky bit, we will use O plus T. Now, if you can recall these bits, they are the same, these letters, they are the same that we use to set these permissions, the ordinary permissions. So not only that we are using the same flags for setting the sticky bits, but also let me also tell you one more thing, that once we set these sticky bits, let's say we have got a file, let's just see the file permissions of this, let's say 777 file. So it would look like read, write, execute, right, for the owner. And then for the group, it would be read, write, execute, and for the others, it would be read, write, and execute. Now, once we use this command U plus S for setting the user ID on a group, then this X over here, it would be changed to S, small s. If this bit is not set, let's say the bit was not 7, but it was, let's say 6, and then we try to use plus S, then this will be capital S. So just remember that if these bits are already set, then it will be small letter. If they are not set, then it will be capital letter. In case we want to use SGID bit, so that will go onto this in the group portion of the permissions, and it will be R, W, and S. For this portion, for sticky bit, it will go into other side. It's just a way to the things have been implemented. So it will go over here and it will be like R, W, and T. Now, as I said, that one way to set the SUID or the SGID and sticky bits is this, in this way, like U plus S. Another way is to use the numerical form. Like we can type in change mod, and afterwards we can put in the numbers, and those numbers are 4 is for setting SUID, 2 is for setting SGID, and 1 is for setting sticky bit. So if I type in, let's say I type in 7, so that first number is for sticky bit. Just hang on, I'm not talking about these 777, just this 7. And after that, I can put in these 3 numbers, which would set the permissions for normal file permissions or folder permissions. So these 777 goes in here, which is this one, and this belongs to these SUID, SGID, sticky bit. Since I have put in 7, so it means that SUID is also on, SGID is also on, and sticky bit is also on. If I want to put in like maybe only sticky bit should be on, so I will put in 1 over here, like this one. And if I want that no bit should be on, like maybe you got a folder or a file whose all 3 bits were on, these special file permission bits were on, maybe 7 was here, and you want to change those permissions to none of them. So you would put in 0, 777. So it will remove all those special permissions if you put in SUID over here. Now I'm going to end this video over here, and in the next video we'll see how to implement all these examples and these special permissions on files and folders.